sun, but oh well. Okay, we're gonna gather over here. I know this seems like a weird spot, but there's a reason for it. And if it wasn't the middle of summer with wild parsnip everywhere over there, we would actually be walking out through that way, because there's an old farm back in there that is not there anymore, but it's kind of fun to look at the what you can find. But where we're standing, are there any indications right around us that there might have been a farm here?
That tree clearings?
So the way the trees are?
It seems like kind of a clearing here.
Oh, there is kind of a clearing there. Yep. And then somebody said, oh, pretty flowers. So we have these lilies coming up. See, these are not native lilies. If we would have gone to Beaver Cemetery, when we hike up into the cemetery, like both sides of the entrance are all covered with these flowers. These were planted by people. And so this is a really good, like we call it like a ghost marker. That's kind of what we like to call it because it makes it a little more, but it's telling us like, ooh, something was done here. People did something here a long time ago. So these lilies, lilac trees, apple trees, pine trees, big old maple trees, especially if they're planted like in square, formation. Those are all indications that people were there. There was a building there. There was a house or a farm there at one point. So if we were to, I'm not gonna make you guys do this because most of you have shorts on today, but if we were to go bushwhacking up in here, we actually find a few foundations of a barn and a house and some interesting stuff. We're not allowed to metal detect on public land. Did you guys know that it's against the law?
Oh,
yeah.
But I bet if you did, there's probably weird things you'd find. Probably nothing worth anything, but nails and barbed wire and old signs and car parts, and sometimes you find pieces of windmills and like milking stuff that was in barns. But I mean, the point is, there's all of that is back in here. This is just one spot. We probably passed a dozen or more spots just like this right along the road that you don't even realize are there. So it's kind of interesting. Yeah.
So like when we say we're going to like a ghost town, like I think a lot of times people think of like Wild West, like boarded up, shuttered taverns, and these old buildings that are but these are the markers of like biological markers of ghost towns, of things that people planted around their farm or their barns.
Yep.
But it's not as obvious, but it's still thinking back and knowing what was here. Exactly. We're on a ghost barn.
Yeah. Ghost farm right now. So what I was told, the house sat here, the farm went out that way. This Highway 74 has been moved over the years, so I'm not sure where it used to run over there. But farm went out that way with their pasture, cropland. And then the Applebee farm that sat over there, that's a whole pond right now. That's one of those man-made wetlands. There's a natural spring that comes out by the farm. And they usually actually have a little building over it called the spring house. And old farms that had springs had these spring houses because that was their refrigerator. That was where they would put the butter and things that they needed to keep cool, was in the spring house because it was kept cold with that cold spring water. And then they had outbuildings, barns, chicken coop, and they farmed land out where it's a wetland now, and then also up on the hillside. And the Applebee farm, that farm, the hillside was actually caving in on their house. The sand behind it was filling in the house. And so when that guy sold his property, he took a huge hit. I think he bought it originally for $16,000, and this is back in the day when $16,000 was a lot, right? And then he sold it to the state for just under $5,000. So he lost a lot of money on his farm, but he was glad to get something for it because nobody wanted it. So one thing I want to do here is kind of recap our story of the valley using some props. So the first prop is this jar of black stuff. And this is kind of why the people were here, why they were here, and this is the resource that really at the end ended up pushing everybody out of here too. What is this? Oreo cookie crumbs?
Yeah.
That's why everybody came.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense.
I don't blend them anymore. Rich soil.
Yes, and I love that you said soil because a lot of times people go, it's dirt. And when I was in college, I took a soils class, and the professor, if you said dirt, I'm not kidding, it was actually kind of funny to see him get PO'd because his face would turn red and there was like a vein that would pop out, and he's like, dirt is scum. Soil is precious. It's to be revered. He was like so dramatic. So yeah, soil, very, very important natural resource that we don't talk about, right?
Your dirt.
Well, if I said, list some natural resources, we probably wouldn't be thinking soil. We'd be thinking, water, trees, plants, animals. but usually we forget about soil is very important. Without our soil, we don't have, you know, a lot of those other natural resources. Okay, and then the settlers come along, they plow up the prairie, and they start planting, what was it?
Flour or wheat.
Wheat, yep, which we grind into flour to make our bread and all of our baked goods. Okay, and we start to realize that planting wheat year after year after year after year is not okay for the soil, so we shift to
Soy.
Corn.
corn, which we still see today, right?
Both.
But we've kind of learned that we got to switch that out with beans or oats or hay or something every so often to keep the soil. There's this documentary. Have you guys seen this documentary or heard of it? It's called Kiss the Ground.
No.
It's got Woody Harrelson. He was in the Hunger Games. He was like the...
Oh yeah.
I don't know.
I love
Yeah,
that guy.
Haymitch. Yes, yeah, he's cool. When I was a kid, there was a show called Cheers, and he was a bartender in that show. Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
So Woody Harrelson is the narrator of this documentary, and it's all about how healthy soil is really important for climate change, like to kind of safeguard us from the drastic impacts of climate change. But he talks about how farming is so important, and like you can have beef, you can be a omnivore and eat meat and vegetables and still help with climate change, because there's this kind of myth out there that you have to be a vegetarian to really help with climate change, which is fine if you're a vegetarian, great. But you can also eat meat, and there's ways that meat can be grown sustainably that protect our soil, that make the soil very organic. But what he talks about is like how in like a spoonful of healthy soil, there's like over 1 million microbes. It's like incredible. And the soil on most of these farms, you scoop it up and there's maybe a dozen. Like it's like we are killing our soils. And he talks about desertification. If you look at like, according to, you know, where we evolved as human beings in the history of Earth, it's kind of this Mesopotamia, cradle of civilization, very fertile. It was very fertile, lush, and now today it's a desert. And that's part of that is because of the way we farmed the land and destroyed the soil, and it turned to desert. In combination with climate change. So soil and how we grow our food, ooh, really cool stuff going on there. A lot to learn. Okay, so we learned that the farming practices then cause a lot of issues. And this is the Whitewater River from 2017. This was a 5.8-inch rainfall. Would you want to, you know, drink that water? I mean, I guess I wouldn't want to drink it if it was clear either, but I wouldn't want to swim in this. I probably wouldn't want to, you know, eat fish that I caught in this.
Wash my hands in it.
Yeah. So, you know, we talk about how
Your hands would be dirty.
past sins on the land, and it wasn't intentional. The people came here, they did the best they could with the resources and the knowledge they had. There's books written about it. This Stanley Trimble, he's a professor from, I think, UC Berkeley, California, Berkeley, whatever that college is out there, university. And he's been coming out here since the 70s studying. He brings students every summer. I think he's retired now, but since 1973, studying the erosion down here. And it's not just the Whitewater Valley, Coon Valley over in Wisconsin too. But it's got a lot of the historic pictures from Whitewater Valley in here. Just looking at the huge impact that agriculture can have on erosion. And you know, we've kind of started to turn things around in the 1938 when the town flooded 28 times? 1938.
Yeah,
So that's 1938. The Conservation Corps came on the scene in the 1930s. We start to see watershed conservation districts forming in the 1940s. Winona County had the first watershed soil and water conservation district in the whole state, so that was kind of cutting edge at the time. We had soil conservationists, some of the first soil conservationists in Winona County doing work here around Winona and Whitewater, piloting experimental practices like rotational grazing and contour strips and some of these things that today are fairly standard practice, but at the time farmers were like, that guy's crazy, he's doing what? And then they would see like, oh wait, his field didn't flood, or he got better crop yields. What was he doing? I want to know now. So they kind of had to pilot it and you know, be, what is that called when you're like setting the trend? There's a word for that.
A trendsetter?
Yeah.
Trendsetter.
Championing it. When everybody else was
Trailblazer.
Trailblazer, that's it. When everybody else was like
Innovator.
yes.
And a lot of times at the time, like Sarah was saying, how are those people looked at by the people around them? How do they look at them? What's that?
Crazy.
You're crazy. That is dumb. That's not the way we do it, right?
Right.
But they were realizing the way that we were doing it was causing major problems. And
Exactly.
actually it was they weren't doing it correctly.
Right. So they had to do a lot of kind of hand-holding, piloting stuff, setting that, doing demonstration, kind of proving that these things could make a difference. And then slowly farmers started to say, okay, I'll give it a try. So conservation was the buzzword. I mean, that's what farmers were doing through I would say through the 80s, and then more recently things have started to regress. And that's why I wanted to show you this. This is 2017. I mean, this is what the water looked like here probably in 1938 when it flooded 28 times. Like, we should be doing better than this. What the heck? So we're seeing shifts that are going backwards, and part of that, in all the interviews I've done, part of that is you've got folks that have retired now, passed away, they're not running the farm anymore, and so this next generation didn't grow up experiencing those floods and experiencing all that erosion, and so those lessons could maybe have been lost because you kind of skipped a generation. And if you don't see it, you know, you maybe read about it, but if you don't see it and live through it, you maybe don't take it as seriously. So that's one thing. We also have like this shift towards ethanol, right? And we're talking about sustainability and trying to be more sustainable and not dependent on fossil fuels. So ethanol was a great concept, but what we're finding is it's leading to a lot of erosion, a lot of water use to grow the corn, and the fuel that the tractors need to burn to plant and harvest the corn. So in the end, like, is it worth it? Right. And with the erosion, it's like, I've been told in some places, especially down in Houston County, the erosion is worse now than it was in the 1930s. And part of it is that ethanol drive. So that's something to think about. And the climate changing trends, you know, can we be sustainable farming the way we farm with these drier spells and then these huge rain events? Probably not. It's showing this doesn't work. So we need to go back to, we need more like perennial crops that stay in the ground year round. And I know they're experimenting with this like kudzu, I don't know, some type of grass that's edible, I guess.
It's kudzu grass.
But at the same time, it's from like India or something. And it's like invasive species, not native species, like where's the balance there? So I mean, my point is, you guys could be like the pioneer investigators, science research people going out into the career field and solving some of these problems for the next generation, you know? So be thinking about that for career opportunities. There's a lot of potential there. So yeah, we have a lot of work to do. The river not only floods, it's high in sediment. Different times of year, it's high in bacteria. We had a fish kill in 2015, so we have fish kills every so often, which you think, wow, that's scary. You know, thousands of trout floating dead in the stream. The guy from the fisheries, the head fisheries guy's like, yeah, it's pretty common. Is that okay for the agencies that are supposed to be protecting the resource to be like, yeah, it's common.
It's just the way it is.
Yeah. And so that fish kill, they linked, but they couldn't prove it. And because they had 3 agencies researching it for 1 year. The public was really PO'd on that one because they couldn't show with hard evidence what caused it, but there was like anecdotal and like witness observations that saw fungicides being applied by helicopter on the day that we got, however much rain we got that day. They know exactly, and the impacts of what was happening to those fish and those prey fish. They were crawling out of the stream and then dying on the riverbank, so they can figure out exactly what chemicals were causing that. And it's linked to this fungicide, but I guess they didn't have enough hardcore evidence. The point on that one was, if you guys ever go down to a water body and you see dead stuff floating around, we're talking, you know, like more than a dozen dead fish, there's a tip line you can call, and you can report that right away. Because what happened was, there's all these dead fish floating. A fisherman actually saw it the day of the fish kill, saw it, but he picked up his phone, he didn't get a cell phone signal, and he's like, I'll call later. And he was camping, he called like a day or 2 later. By the time they got down there and collected the samples, they were like falling apart. They didn't couldn't use that evidence. Yeah. Evidence was too deteriorated by that time. And so that was a big kind of message after that fish kill was, they started putting, you'll see it out if you trout fish at all, they put signs out with these cards you can take, it's got the tip line number on it, report fish kills, so that's a huge thing. But it was directly related to agriculture, which is kind of too bad, you know, like, haven't we learned? Yeah. That's a different thing, that's chemical, that's like something they weren't using in the 1930s, but now, oh yeah, I can go off on tangents there. So, okay, last piece of this story. What is this thing?
A shell for a shotgun?
Yeah, shotgun shell. Why would I put that in there? Like, what?
Lead?
Hunting. Yeah, so there's a sign over there, and at some of these different gates and stuff in the WMA, you'll see these signs. And it's acknowledging where the funding comes from for the wildlife management areas. So if you hunt, there was an act passed in, I think it was 1937, 1938. It was called the Pittman-Robertson Act. It was a national federal law that Congress passed. It put a tax on hunting guns and ammunition. So when you buy your guns, you buy your ammunition to go hunting. That money goes into a federal pot, and the states can apply for that money to use it for wildlife, habitat, restoration, conservation work. So that money, when it became available right after 1938, they were able to bring on Richard Dorr who is buried in Beaver Cemetery. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see his grave. But he's a name that you might recognize because on the map of Minnesota, there's this huge forest that it said there, over 1 million acres. That's what you were reading earlier. Over 1 million acres, and it's the Richard J. Dorr State Memorial Hardwood Forest. It's named after this guy. He's buried in this valley. The wetlands up ahead have a sign around the corner that say Richard J. Dorr Pools, the Dorr Pools. There's an overlook with his name on it around the corner. So it's like, who was this guy? Well, he was hired to oversee these funds, the Pittman-Robertson funds. And the Whitewater Valley was really near and dear to his heart because he was a big trout fisherman, he was a big duck hunter, which we have both those things here. But this area looks like where he grew up in Appalachia. He was from a part of Ohio that was near like West Virginia, so it was like Appalachia, core. He grew up walking in the woods as a kid barefoot. He could find his way around just by the trees, and he said that's how it was. I listened to an interview. He died in like 1973, so I never met him. But I listened to an interview, and he said that walking around in the woods, they would navigate, in Appalachia in the mountains by the trees. So you follow the big cottonwood, however many paces till you get to the giant hickory, and that was kind of how he told directions. So trees were his thing ever since he was a little kid. And so he ended up working for a timber cruiser. He was in the military. He was in West Point Academy. He was in World War I. Got a Purple Heart for saving somebody, pulling him out of the line of fire or something like that. Then he became a timber cruiser, working with the timber cruisers. I don't know if that was in Wisconsin or where that was, because he's moving from Ohio this way. And he ends up working for the Department of Conservation, which today we call the DNR, with the Pittman-Robertson Act. He founded the Save the Wetlands movement, which was a huge national program. I don't know if they're still very active. It was to protect the wetlands on these, kind of farm country, the Dakotas and western Minnesota and that place, where all the ducks and waterfowl will nest in the summertime, because the farmers were kind of digging all these wetlands up to plant crops. So he comes on the scene here at Whitewater, and he's thinking, I wasn't able to save my hometown and my area in Ohio where I grew up, because when he grew up they were strip mining, so they were literally ripping the land open to get to, I think it was the coal underneath.
Yeah.
And he just watched it be destroyed. But he said the Whitewater Valley has a chance, there's something I can do here to actually turn things around and save this valley. So he was very, very adamant about protecting the Whitewater Valley. So they used the Pittman-Robertson money, the money from the tax on this stuff, to start buying up these farms. And that's when the farmers were like, thank God, because nobody wants our land because it's covered in 15 feet of sand and you can't live here. So the state came on, started buying up farms, and that was several decades, and we're still buying up farms. I know Jamie told me that they just bought a chunk of land up over this way a couple years ago. So when farmers are interested still, they're still working out, just like we talked at Weber Dunes, buying from landowners and trying to protect, the goal was to protect the highly erosive landscape, so the steep hillsides, areas that flood down low in the floodplain. He used the trout streams because he knew that there was a lot of support for trout fishing and angling. I mean, that gets people excited, and that's where there's money. So he's like, we got to protect the trout streams, we need to protect the hillsides, we need to protect the forest. And so after they really got this wildlife area going, and he retired, I think in the early 60s, he went on a crusade. And they say crusade because when you're crusading, you're not paid to do it. That's your passion, you're committing yourself to it, and you're probably going through a lot of stress and trauma and personal perseverance to champion this thing. He started traveling around the state, speaking to anybody that would listen. We're talking Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, 4-H clubs, sportsmen's groups, whatever, talking about how we need to protect the hillsides of southeast Minnesota. And so that's where they start this idea of the state forest. He wanted to call it the Veterans Hardwood Memorial Forest, after all the veterans who have come, pioneers and veterans that have kind of fought and died for Minnesota, even though once again, whose history are we telling there, right? After he passed away, they changed it and named it in honor of him. So that's why we hear that name. We have over 1 million acres. I mean, you guys, every county down here has state forest land in it, right? All around Winona. The bluffs that aren't built on, if there's not a big McMansion on top, it's probably state forest land. I mean, that's the gist of it. And what's cool about this valley too, there's 2 bluffs. One guy that's a county commissioner, I shouldn't name his name, slapped up a bunch of rentals up on top of his, and so it's like, thanks a lot. Like for the 500,000 people that vacation down here, you just have, you 3 people that live up there get to go ha 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 ha. And then there's another bluff where somebody put like a yurt or a Quonset hut or something on top of it. So everybody wants these views, right? It's like the $1 million view, but there's actually impacts with building on the bluff tops. I know Winona people probably know a lot of that, but rattlesnakes use those as corridors for migrating. So they say, if you're going to build on top of a bluff, set back at least 500 feet. Nobody does that. Everybody wants to be right on the edge, right? And then just the aesthetic, like, beauty of this blufflands. If you have houses everywhere, it's like, you might as well be in St. Paul, you know? I'm sorry, I'm kind of negative about that, but, like, really, people, set it back a little bit. You can still have access to that view. But you have to really
It's not even that far away.
No, my bedroom window has to be that view.
Oh! He's gonna be the developer. Like,
Have the walkout view from the bed
Yep.
hanging over the lip.
So, I mean, it's really cool because there's a lot of groups now that are, you know, interested in protecting the bluff tops and, you know, that we talked about the land trust and the groups that are helping landowners lock their properties forever into these types of easements where you can't develop and can't build and frack sand mine and all these different things that are potential future threats to our natural resources. So, the thing that I don't hunt, I don't know how many of you guys hunt. I tried squirrel hunting. I could not do it. The squirrel was looking me in the eyes and I was like, I can't pull the trigger. The thing is I can fish. And I know they say like that's not like, what's the word where you put like human traits onto an animal?
Oh,
There's
yeah.
just like a name for that.
Personification.
Yeah, and like because they're cute and fuzzy, it's like, oh, but then the fish is like, it's not so cute, so I can kill that. And so I don't know what it is psychologically with me that I can kill fish and eat fish, and I still feel a little guilty, and I try to be like, don't waste, be respectful, kill it as humanely as possible. But with the furry animals, I have a hard time. So my thing is, and I used to really be against hunting when I was younger. I was like, freaking hunters, it's like kill everything, get all testosterone driven, and it was really bashing guys is what it was, I think.
Nice.
But we need hunters for many different reasons, but I mean, at the bare bones here at the wildlife area, they're funding, I mean, they are in a big part funding these public lands, these wildlife areas, for all of us. And you don't have to hunt to enjoy this place. You can come here and, you know, fish, hike, bird watch, all the things we've been talking about the last couple of days. But the hunters really are the ones that are helping pay a big part of the bill here. So that's cool. Also, we have hunting licenses, the license fees, right? And you know, on the Mississippi River, you guys down around Winona there, the National Refuge, the duck stamps, when people do the duck hunting, they buy the duck stamps. The duck stamps fund like almost a whole pot of money for the duck habitat work they do. Whereas here we're getting money from a few different places. So I know people that buy duck stamps even though they don't hunt, just because they want to support those programs. And I think it's similar with the hunting license and stuff too. So thank the hunters, even if you don't believe in hunting. Because we get to use these lands too. And there's climate change benefits and all kinds of things happening on these lands. I'm going to shut up. I know, Jamie, you had an interesting point when you guys were driving over here. The students in your car had some really deep questions. But I think it would be kind of neat to talk about.
I just asked them the question, why does the Whitewater care about a ghost town? Like, why does Sarah want to support preserving the Beaver Town Hall? And, you know, because one thing she said was, you know, we could do programming here. Like, we would, you know, Whitewater State Park would like to do programming to teach about the ghost town of Beaver.
Yeah.
Why? What's the point? Like, why learn about that? Or what's the point? Or what's the moral of the story of the ghost town of Beaver? Like, what can we learn about it today?
We came to the conclusion that it was you really should do a lot of research and investigate into what you're doing before you do it.
Informed decision making.
Yeah, because the consequences might be more severe than what you're prepared
for generations to come.
Right.
Yeah, we were talking about like the people in the town of Beaver, like they didn't know that plowing up the prairie and planting weeds and using the timber was gonna inevitably destroy their civilization and make them leave. But they were doing something that, you know, they just weren't aware. Like they were using the resources that they had with the technologies and that they were aware of.
Right.
And we were thinking like, is there things today that could be happening? Are we doing things that we don't know that could be potentially destroying our civilization? And then Landon, what was your response? Or what did you say when we were talking about that?
He doesn't remember. That was
We
too
were
long
talking
ago.
about,
I tried saying
use
something,
of
but I got
oil.
interrupted.
Yeah,
Well,
I
you were saying like the use of oil
Oh,
and
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there was
Like
a lot of
oil mining, coal mining, and just using everyday electricity.
Cell phones. I mean, everybody's got a phone.
right.
And even if you're, we were talking about electric energy, but then how do you get the whatever to whatever to get the electric energy? Like, everything should be about moderation You know, like I think really that's kind of the answer to a lot of our things. Like everything in moderation. You need to have that phone on 24/7. When you know, in setting like kind of time because I see that a lot. That's the one thing I feel like I can relate it to kids and younger people is that phone right there. What have you done to make a change in your life to reduce your use of that? Because that is one of the ways we're impacting our energy use and climate change.
Yeah, and like when they like developed and created electricity and using fossil fuels to power electricity, like it's similar like to the farmers of Beaver. They didn't know by plowing the prairie that was going to happen.
Right.
They didn't know by burning fossil fuels that it's going to change the climate. It's going to affect the atmosphere to the point that it's going to change the climate, and that if you proceed and to keep doing that, you could potentially ruin the civilization that you're living in and have it not be there. I mean, that's like the point that we're at, you know. And at a certain point, the people in the town of Beaver said, enough is enough. We can't do this. We can't live here. You know, what a lot of people are trying to do with climate change is like learn from the lessons of Beaver, like what Xander was saying, like know what you're doing and know what the consequences could be. Like, you know, and we're learning about climate change and we are learning that what's causing it. However, there's still a lot of people that are saying, well, no, that's not true. Like, you're crazy to think that. Like, you would be crazy to farm like that in the town of Beaver. Like, you know, and so there's just interesting parallels with like
Definitely.
the town of Beaver, why it happened, how it happened, and what's happening today and what we can learn from that. And I think, you know, I would say that's part of the reason why Whitewater State Park wants to preserve that story, to be able to take people and say, you know, this is what happened here. Like they ruined the resources they were working with. They didn't know. They weren't doing it maliciously or greedy. They were just trying to live, but it happened.
Right.
And that sort of thing can happen
Yep.
and still does happen today, you know.
There was a book in the 70s, I think they did like this State Park Heritage series. So they hired these writers to do research and come up with these nice little like collectible tabletop book, coffee table books about the history of different parks. So the one on Whitewater starts out with a quote and it says, "The history of the Whitewater River Valley is both a warning and a promise." And I like that quote because that kind of sums up like, yeah, we can learn from this scary history. We can move forward with a more sustainable future, right? So what we've been doing in the WMA, and we didn't get into all that. We could spend a whole day just looking at the land management, like the activity you were talking about. Because the animals that we see here, and unfortunately we didn't see a whole lot today. I come through in the morning at like 7:15 this morning, and I saw all kinds. I just stopped right here for sandhill cranes that were crossing with babies.
Wow.
So, but it's because it was quiet in the morning, right? And there was a dead beaver on the road with its tail cut off.
What?
So I took pictures of that because I'm like, that doesn't look legit. I sent it to the conservation officer. But my point was, a lot of these animals were gone from Minnesota. I mean, not just from the valley, but Minnesota. And so it's been decades of work and conservation and reintroduction and getting the habitat back to be able to bring these animals back. So there's a lot to learn from here. And people, yeah, I get so frustrated when I see things going reverse on some of the land around here because it's like, you got to listen to the story. We don't want to go back to where we were. People want to keep
Working
moving
so
forward.
hard.
Yeah,
So,
it's a lot of work.
I
a
was
lot
trying
of
to think
money.
about you guys in the videos you're working on.
It takes
and
so much less time to ruin it than it
right,
does to bring it back.
I know it's true. You can ruin it in less than a decade, and then it takes like 100 years to try to bring it back. And like I said, some of these things are extinct. Passenger pigeons we will never see again. And they used to roost here. They used to live in this area. But thinking of those videos, thinking of the universal themes, you know, when you're trying to tell a story and trying to make it welcoming and inclusive to anybody that might be listening to it, they say use these universal themes like happiness, home, health, love, hate, death, fear, like these universal themes that we can all relate to. So I was trying to think of like this story, what would be a universal theme? And I kind of thought of home because there's ways you can spin a story, but like the Dakota were living here, this was their home. They were pushed out of their home. These immigrants and migrants from out east came here to call it home. They had to leave their home. And then today we see people that Minnesota is like their new home. We have immigrant refugee populations in Minnesota today that have escaped trauma, the Vietnam War with Southeast Asian families. That this is This is where they come every weekend to get away from that trauma. It's amazing. If you drive through here on a Saturday, you're going to see families probably every quarter mile down the road. They pull off, they'll have a couple vans, they'll be sitting out having a barbecue or a picnic. They don't go to the state park. They use the WMA because it's a lot like Thailand or Laos where they live before they came here. They like to be out in the woods. They're fishing, they're catching their fish and eating it right there, morel mushroom. They do a lot of foraging. And to me, that's so cool to see. I get goosebumps because I'm like, they feel at home here. And they've been through a lot of trauma. So that's a theme that kind of can run through a story, right? So trying to have that mindset when you're trying to think of how to frame your story that you're going to be telling and make it inclusive and engaging for anybody. If you pick some random dude off the street to watch your video, how's he going to care? How's he going to connect with that, or she, right? So that was me. That was me going on my soapbox again. We're going to stop. We're going to head back and have lunch and take a little break, use the bathrooms, and then we're going to just take a short walk at Whitewater, go down to the CCC camp, and just kind of hear a little bit about that interesting piece of history and how it's been spun and told to us over the years. And then hopefully you guys will have some free time if you want to do a little hike or something. We'll see.
Which that story that you're talking about is Sam,
Here?
Adam, and Stevens.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Stevens right here. These two.
Okay. Cool. So yeah, we will head back to the park.
I didn't know you were interested in that.